Hey, I'm Weldon Weatherford with eXp Realty. Hope you all had a great Thanksgiving. Hope you have a great Christmas coming up. This is the December monthly housing market update for Wayne County. And there's some interesting data in the report this month. It looked like there was possibly a recovery because, we've kind of been in a recent downtrend for several months now. It looked like there was this great recovery, but then there was a few little things that I'm going to go over with you in this report that really, unfortunately, just kind of camouflaged the real situation and made it look better than what it really is. So let's go ahead and get into the report here. And the title of my report for this month is, average home sale prices appear to recover in November, but what does the data really say? The average home sale prices for November in Wayne County appear to recover with an almost $10,000 price jump in just 1 month, which is really a considerable amount. On the surface, this looks great. Is there a break in the overall downtrend? Especially going into the slower winter season, this could be really good news. But if you dig into the data and you look at the other conflating factors, you realize the cause for this is likely just a temporary, it makes it just a temporary increase. Those factors being are the list to sale price ratio and the total number of homes sold in the higher price ranges versus the number of homes sold in the average price ranges in Wayne County. And I'm going to get into that here in just a minute. And just kind of go over, some situations of, why these prices jumped as much as they did and why, again, it's not something to really get excited about. And the list to sell price ratio was really probably one of the big factors when I looked at that. Really kind of gave me a pause and wanted to really kind of look and see, maybe dig deeper into why we saw this big jump just for the month of November. But the list to sell price ratio, it fell a full 2% for the month of November. That was a very big amount to, over 5% off of asking price. And again, that shows, a very big, that the buyers are really being really picky and they just are not willing to pay some of the prices of these homes. I watch the market daily in real time as larger home prices were drastically reduced, and then based upon the data were also highly negotiated afterwards. Again, like I said, in some cases over 5%. I believe the home sellers in this price range were influenced by the mass media, and they acknowledge that the upper end markets have been declining by as much as 30% in some parts of the country. This is also a byproduct of the bifurcated economy where the poor are suffering while, again, the rich get richer. Several videos and articles online, lay this out in a lot more detail than I get into here. But they say mostly that if you're in the top 10% of wage earners in this country, you really don't see an issue with the economy. It's just the same as it's always been. But your life hasn't really changed while the rest of the population basically is devastated by higher insurance costs, food, property taxes, and more. It has shown up in other markets such as the RVs, which have tanked. Used car market has come back down. Boats, collectibles, those prices have collapsed relative to where they were just 1 or 2 years ago. Many YouTube boat channel influencers have even resorted to raffling off their boats instead of selling them for this particular reason. Again, these are just some examples. I follow, a few of the boating channels, so that gives me a good insight into that market as well. Another conflating factor is that the increase in the average sales prices essentially are just a mirage, and we're just, that's what we're seeing, is that the number of the actual homes sold and the average price for Wayne County, year over year, homes in the $250,000 to $300,000 price range are down by 30%. That's right, 30% from 250 to 300 versus 2024 versus 2025. And then in the $300,000 to $350,000 price point, they're down by almost 12%. Meanwhile, there were many more homes sold over the $400,000 price point, including some homes in the $750,000 and $1.1 million price range that boosted the overall sales averages. Again, that's what skewed, in my opinion, and the data pretty much shows it. That's what skewed this data by 10 grand for November. This is what camouflaged continuing slowly grinding, struggling home housing market into appearing to have this miraculous rebound. Not all is bad, however. Total sales volume, as far as the overall market, was essentially flat year over year, at approximately $23 million of homes listed and sold in our local Hive MLS system. So in comparison to the failing nationwide market, this is, you can look at that as, hey, that's a positive. Our market is still buoyed by being part of the Raleigh Durham RTP, and the Greenville, and I call it the Greenville Global Transport. I call it a market squeeze, where we're getting squeezed between the growth from these two markets. I have optimism for the future. There will be quick stability in any economic or banking induced crash. Wayne County, in my opinion, Wayne County and surrounding areas are highly investable for that reason. Seasonally, the number of home sales are still in line. So, hey, the market is still liquid. You price the home right, you can still sell it. As I have stated all year in my updates, and this is always the case, price sells. It's crucial to include this overall market data in any discussion of home pricing. Buyers essentially are striking in these popular home prices. Again, that 250 to 350 price point, those are the price points, really where, like I said, for Wayne County, where most of your average home buyers are. They are demanding lower prices, as shown by the fewer number of sales in this range, and the average, that the average home buyer can afford. Unless there's some drastic change in mortgage rates, going down drastically, or some huge government stimulus package in the meantime, home sellers need to take heed. And it's again, like I was saying before, and essentially what I was saying in this report, if you're going to be selling your home, again, it depends on what your situation is. Most of the time, like I said, if I go to do a market analysis for you, I'm going to give you a price range of, where I think the ballpark range, based on the data, of where you should list your home at. And, you have to take these market conditions into consideration when when you want to be out within a certain time period. But I want to show you the numbers here. I'm going to pull up on the screen. Let me see. Let's start right here, to really kind of give you an idea of what I'm talking about. And the sold to list ratio, again, what the sold to list ratio is our MLS system. It takes the data, it looks at when the listing was initially put in, and then it compares to the actual final sold price, and then calculates a ratio, and then of course it plots that on a chart, for the overall market, for, like I said, for Wayne County. And you can see right here, what's been the trouble and trend, and this is why I don't think things have really changed, is you can see this ratio has dropped. I really had some optimism, because we had this bump up in October, thinking maybe, hey, things are turning around, and then you see this just big drop here in November, again to over 5% off of asking price. We really had the peak here, I believe this was back in June, and so, and that the reason for that is typically the summertime is your hottest. June really is probably the hottest month of the year, so you had a lot more buyers competing for the same homes, and also a lot of your builders, typically when they're building homes, they try to schedule the bulk of their inventory to be ready around this time period, because they notice when the buyers are going to be out. And builders typically don't negotiate on home price because they want to keep the prices and the appraisals up for their neighborhood. So generally, when you're buying a new construction home, they're going to give you incentives up front, but they're not going to necessarily negotiate on asking price. But you can see right here, like I said, buyers are still on strike, if not more on strike. And I'm going to go over here in a few minutes. I'm going to show you um, just some really eye-opening data that's really will put this you know into picture for you. And here, like I said, you see this, what's going on here. I got a question mark here. Like I said, I saw this initially and I was like, hey, maybe things are all of a sudden the market is turning around. Things are going to be great now. Maybe we're coming out of this the doldrums, as I call it, and things are going to turn around. And like I said, it was a huge jump. If you look at the average sold price here, was around 270, almost up to 280. Like I said, almost 10 grand. So you get really excited when you see that. So, but unfortunately, as I've been going over in this report, that is, like I said, the data unfortunately is showing a different situation. And this is part of that data I was telling you about. As you can see here, again, this first column here. This is 2024, and then this is 2025. So you can see, we had a 60% increase, 5 to 8 homes, over 350. Some of that you could say inflation and maybe home prices have gone up, so that market has increased. But the charts I'm getting ready to show you here in a minute, I think, are gonna, say that's not the case. Same here. We had one more house sold in this price point, two in the 450 to 500 range, and of course this was equal from last year. And what I saw in this price point, because I've been watching a lot of these homes on the market, a lot of them been sitting for a long time. Some of them 6 months or longer. I noticed there were a lot of huge price reductions. I think a lot of these sellers, they've been watching the news. We're going into the winter months, and obviously, if they know if they want to move their house, they're going to have to price it competitively. So I think really that's where you saw a lot of this uptick. We also had a few unique homes that typically don't come on the market, like the Walnut Creek area on the lake, which, are very unique properties. And those tend to sell well here in Wayne County just because of scarcity purposes, for no other reason. There's just not many places like, Walnut Creek if you want to live in this area. So, but that's, my explanation for that. Let's go to the next slide. And again, that shows, again, we didn't have any homes, any homes over 600,000, 500,000 sold at all in November of last year. So again, that bumped our sales data up this year, for the month of November, one over 750, one over 1.1 million. But this is the kicker, and this is what stings, and really gives you a real idea of what's really going on in this market. Basically that was November of last year, November of this year. That was almost a 30% decline in year over year in the 250 to 300, and then a 12% decline in the 300 to 350. And this price range, this is Wayne County. If you take two average incomes for Wayne County, this is generally, the price point that they can afford. These are just type of homes that are what you would call your average family homes now in this price point. And that gives you an idea of what's really happening, that the buyers just are not there, or they're, like I said, they're either not there or they're on strike, for as price wise. And you see that in that list of price to sell ratio, that the buyers just are not willing to come up. And they're, unless the home is in really good condition, it's something unique, it's special. You just have kind of a cookie cutter style, looks like every home in the neighborhood that was built kind of home. you're going to have to compete, on price. Now it's not like it was, 2, 3, 4 years ago, where there was just no homes available and buyers would pay, no matter what the price was. You're gonna, you may have to do a little bit of negotiating, so figure that in when you are planning to sell. Let's go to the next slide. And here's just your final, basically summary of the data here for the month of November. And again, that's showing the increase in the median sales price, which did go up to 275. But again, I think that 10 grand was skewed from last month, because of the homes that were sold in the upper price point. And that's what skewed that data to that range. A little bit of a positive, if you want to call it that, is the average days on market did come down, to a very reasonable 56, and that's something to watch. I mean, obviously, if this number can stay around 50 or even drop lower, then that's showing buyers are coming back. I don't foresee, again, we're going into the winter months. It's going to be very difficult, in the January, February reports to really get a grasp on that. The May and June numbers, reports are really kind of what gives you the pulse of the overall, long term markets. But 56 is not, that's not a bad number. Again, I think we've been hanging around that 70 to 80 uh, day range, here for a while. So it's good to see that number drop. But again, the sold to list ratio is what's killing us. 94.8%. Really need to see that number come back up, to get, I think around the average has been around 96, 97, historically. And so we really want to get, closer to that percentage. That again, that's showing really where the buyers are right now. They are on strike essentially. If they're going to buy a house, they want a deal on it. These numbers over here, I'm not so concerned about. Again, some of this is seasonality. You're going to see fewer people listing, going into Thanksgiving and Christmas. That's not unusual, which is going to bring down the number of active listings as well. And then obviously there's not as many buyers out, in the month of November, December, January. Again, you generally don't start seeing a pickup in the market, a real pickup in the market, until late February or March. And when it comes to, a lot of people say, well, if that's the case, why do I want to, sell a house during this time of the year? Well, for the main reason is, again, it's supply and demand. If there's no other homes like yours on the market right now, and again, especially if you have any kind of unique property, it'll really stand out because there's just really not as many. There's not as many homes on the market, so so like I said, there's never a bad time. As I tell clients, I've always told clients, there's never a good or bad time to sell or buy a house. It's just whatever is the best time for you, and then you just look at the market conditions, and the market is what the market is during that time period, because again, we can't predict the future. Home prices could go up, this spring, or let's say, we do have some kind of banking crisis, or we have some sort of unknown issue that nobody could have foreseen. We could have home prices crash. So same thing is if you're buying a home. A lot of these people, they sat on the sidelines, and because they didn't purchase, they said, well, I'm going to wait for the home prices to come back down. And, some of them got priced out of the market, especially some that have been sitting for 3 or 4 years, now can't afford to buy a house at all. So again, there's never a bad time to sell. They're never, in my opinion, again, this is my personal opinion, but, they're never going to quit destroying the value of the dollar. And, let me click back over here. In my opinion, they're never going to, quit destroying the value of the dollar. And in all reality, home prices or home values, there is some supply and demand, that does affect home prices. But the reality is the value of the dollar is declining. homes have been seen really since the 1960s, the late 60s especially, basically as an inflation hedge. And, so buying a home, any hard asset, whether it's, silver, gold, real estate, anything like that, those help protect you in times of high inflation. At least it helps protect your wealth. And again, that's one of the main reasons, for one of the reasons for purchasing a home. So it's an investment in addition to being a roof over your head, a place to raise a family, a place to establish yourself, and be a part of the community as well. Um, so like I said, there's never a good time or bad time. It's just again, like I said, it's whatever is the best time for you. So again, if you are thinking about selling your house, you got a home to sell, a property to sell, I'll be glad to take a look at it for you, and kind of do a market analysis. There's no charge. I like to go out to the property, physically take a look at it. This is not a Zillow's estimate or whatever you want to call it, one of those online things. If you call me and you want a market analysis, I'll give you a true, market analysis, kind of walk you through things that might be done to the property to improve its value, what things might not improve the value. A lot of people think they need to do a little bit of everything, but some of those things are not really necessary, and or not, or basically you're not going to improve the value by doing it. It can be like a 1-to-1 or even a less than 1-to-1 ratio, in some cases, if you're just replacing something that's really not broke. And I can give you and walk you through, which are the best, what's the best return, or ROI, I guess you would call it, return on your money, when you're looking to do things, whether it's improving certain parts of your landscaping or painting or, just anything like that. And also, like I said, if you're looking to purchase, our MLS system goes anywhere really in detail from Clayton all the way to the coastline. I've sold properties down at the beach, down at Southport, in between here, around the Newbern area, and of course Wayne County, which is where I'm based out of, and where I'm from. So I have very detailed knowledge. When you're looking to hire an agent, you want to know somebody who knows where all the flood zones are, some that might not even be on the map. I know, I've managed over 1,100 rentals, so I know where the majority of the septic problems are as well that you may not know about, and may not even be able to tell from a septic test, because some of those areas, it only fail when they get really wet. But again, unless you have, it's called local knowledge. Unless you have that local knowledge, you don't really know for sure, in a lot of cases. So, when you're thinking about hiring your agent, you want somebody who's knowledgeable. I practiced for now over 26 years in this market. There's pretty much, I've been in a house in just about every neighborhood, especially the ones that, that were built, from, since before 2020, because there have been a few brand new neighborhoods, and seems like they spring up every day now. But I've been in just about every neighborhood in this county. I know the styles of the houses. I know the characters of the neighborhood. So you tell me what you're looking for. I generally, can point it out for you, give you some really good ideas, the schools and that sort of thing. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this report. Again, just wanted to dig deep into the data this month because, like I said, it looked like things were turning around. And for a minute there, like I said, for about a 2-week period, it seemed like, my phone calls had picked up, buyers were calling. Of course, then kind of died back down again. I call it, I think back during the 2008 crash on, if you watch CNBC and some of these other channels, they used to call it green shoots. So maybe we saw a green shoot of things, turning around, as far as, the amount of sales activity. But, things are still kind of what I call just kind of grinding along. We kind of been bouncing along, nobody, will call it a recession. And it's technically, I guess, if you figure in government spending, in the GDP, and again, that's you can get into the weeds with that. You can say we haven't been in a recession, but the reality is things have been very slow. It's relative to historical standards. But like I said, the housing market here is still moving. You can still buy a house. You can still sell a house. The banks are still, financing. They're loosening some of their standards. I know there's talk about even possibly doing away with credit score based lending to kind of make it more fair for everyone. Basically, doing more of a manual. Well, it's not really a manual, but more of a computerized slash manual underwriting where it's just not a score. They actually look at your real payment histories for things such as rental histories and things like that, and using that kind of data for approval. So we're still chugging along, and so we'll have to see what happens here coming up in January. Um, I don't know. Like I said, we're going into the winter months, so it's going to be, a little bit more difficult because there's not as much data and there's just not as much activity. But I will be watching to see what the trends are, if we can break out of that low trend, and then with real strength. We want to see a market break with homes in the prime price points going up. We want to see those sales going up. That's what's going to show the real true strength of this economy. So, but with that, I hope everyone has a Merry Christmas, and I will see you next month.